All right, so I looked at the clinical practice guideline on exercise-based knee and anterior cruciate ligament injury prevention, and I completed the Agree to tool. The reviewers are listed below. So to start, I wanted to hit the purpose of this clinical practice guideline. They laid out 5 things that they were looking at. First, they were just wanted to review the evidence in the scientific literature for exercise-based knee injury prevention programs. They wanted to identify exercise-based knee injury prevention programs that are effective for specific subgroups of athletes. They wanted to describe the evidence for the components, dosage, and delivery of exercise-based knee injury prevention programs. They wanted to provide suggestions for the implementation of exercise-based knee injury prevention programs, and then they wanted to create a reference publication for the long list of health professionals there regarding the best current practice of exercise-based knee injury prevention programs. So the pros and cons list, kind of short here, but I talk about it a lot when we talk about the Agree to tool. So just kind of hit some quick ones here. Pros of the CPG, it's very clear. They do a really good job of breaking down everything and making sure that it's easy to understand. They have high level of evidence recommendations, so they found really good evidence to back what they were looking at. Their figures and tables have a ton of information, and they're really pretty easy to follow. If you have something you're looking for, you can just quick hit one of those figures or tables and find what you want to look at. And then they have really good evidence on differences in gender, sport, components of intervention, dosage, and compliance. Cons I actually had a hard time with. Overall, I mean, it's just missing a few components within the Agree to tool that could increase the overall strength of quality. You'll see at the end, I have it rated pretty high quality. Maybe expanding more on harms and contraindications, but as health professionals, we kind of know that stuff already, especially around ACL and knee injury type activities. And then maybe some key findings were left out. But overall, lots of pros, not many cons, good quality. So as we move into the Agree to tool, we'll start with domain 1, scope and purpose. For the first subheading, I gave it a 7 out of 7. Objectives were easy to find, well written, and included both health intent, expected, and target population. The second subgroup, health questions, were also very easy to find, very well laid out, and the clinical questions were easy to understand, as kind of seen in my first slide with the purpose. The third subgroup about population, I gave a 6 out of 7. They did a good job of talking about the intended target population and subgroups of athletes. However, it may be a little bit to read, or it took me a little bit to read and find all the information. It's all there, but maybe it could be laid out a little bit better. Kind of be a nitpicky, but there's that. As we move into domain 2, talking about stakeholder involvement, this took me some time to read through and find, but the fourth subheading, I gave a 5 out of 7. The information within this was found on page 822 and is laid out nicely. However, they did not include the individual contributions, so something that could increase the strength of quality. The fifth one gave 6 out of 7. It's very well written paragraph in the methods section, breaks down who was involved in the validation process. However, it's a little wordy, could be a little condensed and simpler, but maybe that's what they were going for, is more complex. But once again, being nitpicky. The sixth subgroup, I gave a 7 out of 7. Target users are very clearly laid out in the last paragraph of the aim to guideline section of the introduction. As we move forward, we're into domain 3, rigor of development. Subgroup 7, gave out 7 out of 7. Appendix A and B do a really good job of laying out the full search strategy and results. There's a little bit of it within the CPG, but if you're looking for a clear cut what they did, Appendix A and B are for that. 8, I gave 7 out of 7. Inclusion and exclusion criteria are laid out on the first page of the methods section, as well as Appendix 6, which gives a very nice flow chart of how articles were included and excluded. So group 9, I gave a 7 out of 7. Within the methods section, there's a quick blurb on bias and level of evidence, and then the results are very well laid out in Appendix F and G if that is something you're interested in and want to look more into about this clinical practice guideline. Subgroups 10, 6 out of 7. Initially, I had a really hard time finding it. It took me a couple times to really go through and find it. However, once I did find it, they did a good job of explaining the different tools as well as how they dealt with the discrepancies in scoring. Moving through domain 3 further, so group 11, this is the lowest score I gave, 3 out of 7. You know, the potential benefits, harms, and contraindications are kind of discussed throughout the CPG, and maybe it's more like known knowledge is what they're expecting, but there's no apparent data to support these statements that I could easily find. So expansion on this could just easily bump their quality of this clinical practice guideline. Number 12, I give a 7. Does a great job breaking down each recommendation as well as the link to the evidence. Subgroup 13, I gave a 4. The internal and external reviewing was completed. However, I could not find any information on the methods or key findings found by the external reviewers. So just once again, could make it a little better. 14, I gave a 7. Very clear statement listed in the methods section on page A5, reporting that the guideline will be reconsidered for review again in 2022. So coming up. Moving into domain 4, 7 out of 7 to start. Very clear and concise recommendations are provided by the CPG, including the intended population group and health professionals who should be using the evidence. They also break it down into A and B evidence, which I really like. 7 out of 7 on the next one, very clear breakdown of all the different options reviewed and recommended in this CPG. They look at gender, sport, and activity type. I kind of already talked about that in the pros. Number 17, I gave a 6 out of 7. Still really strong recommendation. Each objective has a great section for the recommendations based off of the evidence. And the chart on A14 is easy to follow. Could be condensed a bit, as it could be a lot to look at, especially if you get overwhelmed real easy. So just being nitpicky again. Moving into domain 5, applicability. 7 out of 7 to start. Each objective within this CPG has a paragraph titled Evidence Synthesis, which does a great job explaining who this applies to as well as why. Number 19, 7, this great job breaking down all of the recommendations within the different appendices as well as the flowchart on A14. Section 20, I gave a 4. I could not find much information on the potential resource implications within this CPG. But if you think about it, most of the exercises that I talk about really can be modified if equipment is not available. It's really the only thing that would be a resource implication unless you needed tools to extract test or something like that. But moving on, 21, I gave a 6 out of 7. Each recommendation breaks down the appropriate population and dosage. For the most part, does a good job of explaining using a broad range of age and population types. Moving into domain 6, 7 clear statement about funding is found on A4. 6 out of 7 for 23, a statement on A4 states the authors met to review their findings and all disagreements were resolved by discussion. So they had hashed out a few things, but they all came to a conclusion together. So overall, I went back and forth on this. I really wanted to give it a 7 out of 7 because I thought this was a really good CPG, and I ended up going 6 out of 7 just because I did give a few low scores. But overall, 100% I would recommend this guideline for use and for all of the health professionals that they talk about in their purpose. Anybody that's interested in prevention of ACL injuries or prevention of lower limb injuries, this would be a good start. They do a good job breaking down the evidence into high and low, as well as what they found works, as well as what they found doesn't work. So overall, really good job. Thanks for listening.